Imagine for a second if you built a dam to contain London. For a start, it would have to be incredibly tall. The same dam would overshadow Paris, Singapore, and, well, actually, most cities. It's what the poorest country in Central Asia is actually attempting to do, and if successful, it'll be the first country in history to pull it off. Tajikistan, this little nation way over here, is building the world's tallest dam. At 335 meters high, it'll generate power equivalent to 3 nuclear reactors. Not only will it solve the country's energy crisis, but it also has the potential to radically transform the region and lift its people out of poverty. But this project's been in the making for a long time, and we mean a very, very long time. Because the world's tallest dam is actually a Soviet megaproject. Construction began way back in 1976, and now, half a century later, it's finally being finished. Now, say the words Rogun Project to anyone in the former USSR, and you'll conjure up an almost mythical image. Like the palace of the Soviets that almost came to be, but instead of in Moscow, this Soviet fever dream was in the rural mountains of Central Asia. But what do we mean by a Soviet megaproject? Well, the USSR was famous for launching absolutely enormous construction schemes, often in extreme conditions and at immense human and financial cost. Whether it was a 227-kilometre canal in the White Sea dug largely with prison labour, a huge steelwork city modelled on the US and built from scratch in the Urals, or some of the largest dams Europe has ever seen. But unlike the palace of the Soviets, many of these dams were actually built. They included the Volga hydroelectric station in central Russia, the Bratsk Dam on the Angara River in Siberia, and yes, plans for the Rogun Dam in what is now Tajikistan. But the Rogun Dam would never have been possible without the innovation and engineering might that these other dams had brought, the Bratsk Dam in particular. At 125 meters high, it was nearly as tall as a skyscraper itself, and the Bratsk Reservoir behind it is one of the largest man-made lakes in the world. It stretches for 5,400 square kilometers, making it larger than some countries. But hey, it's not like there's short of space in Russia. Bratsk Dam is located here, deep in remote Siberia on the Anfara River. Construction began in 1954, and at peak it employed 40,000 people. A new city, Bratsk, was built from scratch to house the workforce. The dam was a concrete gravity dam and was designed so that its own weight would resist the pressure of the water behind it. A gravity dam holds back water because it's so massive that the horizontal pressure of the reservoir physically can't push it over or slide it downstream. Think of it like a giant wedge of concrete anchored into rock. The heavier and wider it is at its base, the harder it is for water pressure to move it. As is typical for Siberia, it was built under extreme weather conditions, with winter temperatures plunging below minus 40 degrees Celsius. Construction workers faced permafrost, intimidatingly long transport distances, and complete isolation. Concrete had to be heated during pouring to stop it from freezing, and equipment was adapted for permafrost and the extreme cold. After diverting the river through temporary tunnels and cofferdams, the main dam was constructed in blocks, about 26 to 30 meters wide. Flooding the Bratsk Reservoir took several years and required the resettlement of some 30,000 people, as the surrounding villages and farmland were all submerged. Bratsk was soon called the Light of Siberia. It motivated the country and became the stuff of Soviet legends. It was in the wake of this success that the Rogun project was launched in 1976 as part of the USSR's push to industrialize Central Asia and expand irrigation and energy supplies. You see, Central Asia had incredible deposits of oil, natural gas, uranium, and non-ferrous metals. And all of these were things the USSR needed to support its European industrial base, which at this point in time was beginning to stagnate. The push into Central Asia included steel plants, coal mines, roads, railways, and the tallest dam in the world, but not the one you're thinking of. You see, the Soviets actually built the tallest dam in the world once before, right here in Tajikistan. This is the Nurek Dam, which was completed in 1979. At 300 meters, it's roughly the same height as the Eiffel Tower, and was the world's first super tall dam structure. It served as a precursor to almost everything the Rogun Dam would face. It was built on the same river and in the same mountainous terrain. Tens of thousands of villagers were resettled to create its reservoir. Construction involved tens of thousands of workers, including many brought in from other Soviet republics. The dam altered local ecosystems and contributed to the USSR's broader water mismanagement in Central Asia, famously linked, albeit indirectly, to the Aral Sea disaster. It was a prestigious project to show that socialism could bring progress to one of the Union's poorest regions, and by all means it was a success. Even after the collapse of the Union, the dam provided up to 90% of the country's electricity, so it was natural that the Soviets looked to build another, even bigger dam further up the river. They envisioned this new dam would generate massive amounts of electricity, and as a bonus could control the river's seasonal flooding and provide irrigation water for cotton fields in Tajikistan, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. Its energy would feed not just Tajikistan, but also Uzbekistan and southern Kazakhstan, creating an integrated Central Asian grid. It would be a revolution, and we know how the USSR feels about revolutions. Work began in 1976 with excavation and the building of a coffer dam. That's a temporary structure built inside the river that pumps out water to keep the worksite dry. Then, the project stalled. It was far too ambitious for its own good. While they had managed to build the Rogun Dam, this new site presented some extreme challenges. It had an unstable geology, a very high seismic risk, and required massive amounts of expensive tunnelling. Early work revealed leakage and landslide risks and forced repeated design changes. By the 1980s, under Brezhnev and then Gorbachev, the USSR faced stagnation and limited resources for giant infrastructure projects like this. The money went elsewhere: the ongoing Afghanistan war, the arms race, and the Chernobyl cleanup. Central Asia, which was already seen as peripheral and not that important to the USSR, suffered from reduced funding and faded from view. Even during the Soviet era, Rogun was controversial. Downstream republics like Uzbekistan feared the dam would give Tajikistan too much control over water flows critical for cotton irrigation. This made Moscow cautious about pushing the projects too hard in the later Soviet years. By the time the USSR disintegrated, construction was already behind schedule. Tajikistan, newly independent in 1991, inherited the unfinished dam, but lacked the money, expertise or materials to get it finished. The giant project had been planned as an all-union effort, needing equipment, funding and workers from across the entire USSR, and all that vanished pretty much overnight. To make things worse, the country then promptly descended into a violent civil war right after independence. The Rogun construction site was looted, equipment was destroyed, and many engineers and workers fled. Any chance of major progress after 1992 evaporated. But then, something happened at the turn of the millennium. By the year 2000, the country was stabilising, and the government was looking for ways to rebuild the economy. Restarting Rogun offered energy independence and export revenue. It offered money. The entire country suffered from blackouts and chronic energy shortages, especially in the colder months. Tajikistan had to rely on importing energy from its neighbours Uzbekistan and Russia. Around 90 to 92% of the country's energy comes from hydroelectric power, which means that unfortunately it's highly prone to seasonal shortages. Most of Tajikistan's rivers are fed by glaciers and snow in the Pamirs and other mountains. In spring and summer, the normally snowy caps of the mountains in Central Asia melt, and that water goes down to swell the country's rivers, filling its reservoirs and powering its dams. But in winter, those same mountains and glaciers freeze, and instead of raining, it mostly snows. There's then less water to power the dams. The Rogun Dam tries to combat this by storing water to use in these seasons, but it's not enough. Tajikistan was in dire need of another source of electricity. It needed the Rogun Dam. And as luck would have it, around this time, Russia was beginning to stabilise too. The country was experiencing an economic upturn after a terrible depression. The 90s were officially over. Russia, through companies like Rusal, the aluminium giant, expressed interest in financing Rogun because it needed cheap electricity for aluminium production. That spurred preliminary work to start again on the Megadam, but it didn't last long. Building the world's tallest dam isn't cheap, and the costs just kept on spiralling. At this point, by the mid-2000s, the price was in the tens of billions of dollars. President Emomali Rahmon made Rogun a national symbol, even encouraging citizens to buy shares in the dam, but it failed to generate enough funding. Finally, in 2016, Italian company Cellini Impreglio, now Webuild, took over construction, and boy did they have their work cut out for them. Back in 1993, the site suffered serious flooding which destroyed much of the existing construction works. The numerous earthquakes didn't help matters either. In fact, it was the earthquakes that really scared the engineers. Now, let's just pause for a moment and really look at that in context. The only structure comparable to this dam in height is a super tall skyscraper. Not a regular skyscraper, a city-defining 300-metre plus tall, super tall skyscraper. Think the Shard in London, or the John Hancock Centre in Chicago, or Tokyo's new tallest building, the JP Mori Tower. Tokyo is another city where seismic activity is a key factor in the safety of a building. These super tall structures have to shake, but they also have to remain standing. The JP Mori Tower can withstand violent earthquakes because of base isolation. It means that its foundations effectively decouple the building from ground motion. Instead of the whole tower shaking with the earth, the isolators separate it and absorb some of that seismic energy. All throughout the skyscraper, there are mass dampers, essentially giant pendulums or tuned systems within the structure that sway in the opposite direction of the building and help to keep it steady. Now, all of these are ingenious solutions, but the problem is none of them can be transferred to a dam. A dam can't be separated from its base. It has to be firm and solid and hold back thousands of litres of water, an almost unimaginable weight. So engineers came up with a number of solutions. Rogun is designed as a rock-fill embankment dam with a central clay core. Unlike concrete arch or gravity dams, a rock-fill structure is flexible, meaning it can move in an earthquake without cracking. The clay core provides water tightness, while the massive rock-fill shoulders dissipate the energy from the earthquake. The material behaves somewhat like a cushion. During an earthquake, it can settle, compress, and shift without catastrophic failure. The foundations of the dam have been reinforced to prevent liquefaction. That's what happens when soil loses its strength following a quake. Emergency spillways and tunnels can also make sure that the dam won't be overtopped if landslides or quake-related blockages affect water levels. That's when the water in the reservoir spills over the dam wall. And they really can't over-prepare for this situation. Rogun Dam's in a zone where quakes of magnitude 7 or even 8 are possible. But before building could re-begin, engineering and construction teams had to divert the powerful river. To build any large dam, the river must be diverted away from the construction site so that workers can build on a dry foundation. With Rogun, that meant creating huge underground tunnels through the mountainside. In total, 4 diversion tunnels were designed, each around 1.1 to 1.5 kilometers long and around 11 to 15 meters in diameter. 2 were built on the left bank during the Soviet period, which engineers had to rehabilitate years later to ensure they were fit for purpose. Then they completed 2 more on the right bank. These tunnels effectively act like giant bypass pipes, channeling the river around the dam site. By October 2016, Tajikistan announced the successful diversion of the river into the newly completed tunnels on the right bank. It really was full steam ahead. Once the diversion was in place, the riverbed at the dam site was drained. That enabled excavation down to the bedrock so that the new rockfill embankment could be placed. Construction began by carefully compacting layers of clay at the centre of the dam site. This clay spine keeps water from leaking through. Meanwhile, on the other side of the clay core, massive amounts of rock and gravel were dumped and compacted in layers. The dam wasn't built all at once. First, a starter dam was raised to a height of about 75 to 100 metres. That allowed partial impoundment of water and testing of systems. Then, successive stages of rockfill and clay placement gradually increased the dam height. By 2018, the water had risen high enough for the first turbine to begin producing electricity. The plan is for the dam to be fully complete by 2029, with the reservoir full by 2036. In August 2025, it was reported that the dam's crest had reached about 1,110 metres above sea level. That's higher than Saudi Arabia's future Jeddah Tower. This is a major milestone and close to the eventual full height, 1,300 metres above sea level at crest. But there's still a large volume of embankment rockfill and clay core work to build. While 2 of the 6 turbines are already commissioned and operating, one in 2018, another in 2019, their production is not yet at full capacity. Gradual filling of the reservoir is scheduled to begin once enough height and ceiling are in place, but the reservoir won't be at its full level until 2036. The total cost to complete the project remains enormous, with estimates of around 6.2 to 6.4 billion US dollars, and the battle to secure that funding remains ongoing. Despite all the construction challenges, this dam has not been without its wider controversies. Like the Nurik Dam before it, once its reservoirs are full, entire valleys are going to be inundated and local communities will have to be displaced. 46,628 people, in fact, from 69 villages. As of 2024, over 15,000 residents have already been relocated. That's resulted in loss of farming land and income for many people, and the new settlements are often less than adequate, with limited access to schools and healthcare infrastructure. Tensions with neighbouring Uzbekistan remain as well, with the country even hinting at possible conflict. It isn't the first time that a megadam has sparked international chaos. The Grand Renaissance Dam, the absolutely massive megaproject in Ethiopia, has just been officially inaugurated and is now functioning. But down the Nile, Egypt isn't too happy about it. The Rogun project has the potential to create conflict too, but it could also achieve something miraculous. By exporting clean energy to neighbouring countries, it could replace fossil fuels in the region. These colossal projects reshape mountains, rivers, and even entire countries. There's a tremendous amount of responsibility on the engineers and decision makers to get them right, because once you've built the world's tallest dam, you can't exactly go back.